All right, throwing me off my game already. In honor of the Liwat the village of Pemberton acknowledges that we are meeting within the unceded territory of the Liwat Nation. Good evening, my name is Mike Richmond, and as mayor of the village of Pemberton, I'll be chairing this public hearing. Cameron Chalmers, village planning consultant, will make a brief presentation on the official community plan amendment bylaw and the zoning amendment bylaw. And Sheena Fraser, manager of corporate and legislative services, will record your comments for the minutes, which will form part of the public record on this matter. Also in attendance are Councillor Amika Antonelli, Councillor Ted Craddock, Councillor Leah Noble, and Councillor Ryan Zant. The public hearing is convened pursuant to Section 465 of the Local Government Act to allow the public to make representations to council respecting matters contained in proposed official community plan, Tayada École de la Vallée, bylaw 902, 2021, and zoning amendment, Tayada École de la Vallée, bylaw 903, 2021. Notification of this public hearing was advertised in the September 9th and September 16th, 2021 issues of the Peak News Magazine. Notices were also posted at the Village of Pemberton offices and on the village notice board located at the post office. The notice was provided on the village website. For those in attendance, please note that this hearing is a live webinar and is being recorded. A recording of the meeting will be available on the village's website following the meeting. Every one of you present who believes that your interest in the property is affected by the proposed bylaws shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the proposed bylaws. Once I've announced that the hearing is open to the public for comment, please click on the raise hand feature in the webinar controls. This will notify village staff that you would like to speak. Your microphone will be unmuted when it is your turn. Each speaker will have up to 5 minutes to be heard. Once everyone has had a chance to speak, those who wish to speak again may do so if they have new points to present. None of you will be discouraged or prevented from making your views known. However, it's important that you restrict your remarks to matters contained in the proposed bylaws. When speaking, please commence your remarks by clearly stating for the public record your full name and address, and whether you're in favor or opposed to the bylaws. Members of council may, if they wish, ask questions following a presentation. However, the main function of council members at this public hearing is to listen rather than to debate the merits of the proposed bylaws. This public hearing is not a question and answer period. It is an opportunity for mayor and council to hear the views of the public. This hearing is your final opportunity for input on the proposed bylaws. I will now ask Mr. Cameron Chalmers to introduce OCP Amendment Tayada École de la Vallée Bylaw 902 and Zoning Amendment Tayada École de la Vallée Bylaw 903. Mr. Chalmers. Oh, has he not been present?
Good evening, Mayor Richmond and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present. Yes, as you mentioned, this is a concurrent public hearing to two bylaws for a proposed French school. The application has been made by CSF, which is the French School District, on lands that were formerly considered phase 5 of the Tayada development. So these are lands that front Highway 99 and are at the stub of the two strata roads within the Tayada development, but the access for this proposal will be taken directly from Highway 99 and will have no direct relationship to or through the Tayada project. The official community plan bylaw is required to permit the institutional type use that's being considered here, and the zoning bylaw amendment is simply an amendment to add school as a permitted use to the comprehensive development 5 zone. The proposed development is for a full school with ages kindergarten to grade 12. It's a community school. It's contemplating a fairly large building. There's not detailed building designs necessarily at this stage, but the proponents did prepare some conceptual plans. So we're looking at a school of around 6,900 square meters up to 7,000 square meters, that sort of size. So a full size, full service school. The property measures around 10.13 acres. There's some encumbrance from BC Hydro right of way, and there will be some setbacks likely from the highway as well. But the proposal effectively is for a full school with all of the facilities. These two bylaws would be required for it to proceed, and council on June 1st gave first and second reading to the two bylaws, set a date and time for a concurrent public hearing, which is ultimately arrived at tonight, and also established a number of conditions at that time. And just one note that staff are compelled to introduce into the public hearing to ensure that council has the ability to acquire this information before they deliberate third readings. Attached to tonight's agenda is a letter from CSF, and the purpose of that letter is to outline a concern with one of the prior two obligations that was established by council on June 1st. And most notably, the wording of the condition could be interpreted to say that the CSF is obligated to fully construct and build a pedestrian crossing bridge over Pemberton Creek before council will consider adoption. There's been some new information that's emerged, particularly since June 1st, about potential funding through other adjacent developments and other opportunities as well. And as CSF has outlined in their letter, there's concern that they are utilizing public funding to construct the school, obviously, and that funding has some pretty significant limitations around what may or may not be funded. And the concern of CSF is that the way the condition is worded, there may be a situation where they are not able to advance their project, and because they will not be able to leverage the funding to construct the bridge on their own. That said, staff are very confident that there are solutions where CSF can participate in a solution to the bridge crossing. We do expect that will be a short-term deliverable, but it will not rely solely on CSF. So they've respectfully requested that council modify that condition. And you can consider that at the time of third reading, but effectively it would be a modification which would not oblige them to solve the bridge issue before they receive adoption. They would still be partners in coming up with a solution, but it wouldn't be solely a deliverable of this project. So, Mr. Mayor, just to conclude, a number of letters did come in today. I'll defer to Mr. Fraser to provide you the final tallies. But the application itself has gone through the statutory process under the Local Government Act. Most notably, it has been advertised in 2 editions of the Peak News magazine. It did receive first and second reading of council, and it would be appropriate for council to now consider representations from the developer or the proponent in this case and the public. With that, Mr. Mayor, I'd be open to any questions you may have before we hear from them.
Thank you, Mr. Chalmers. Any questions before we go to correspondence or information? Any questions on that presentation? Hearing none, I'll go to Ms. Fraser to let us know about correspondence and petitions.
Thank you, Your Worship. Today, we've received a total of 27 letters of correspondence or submissions with respect to the public hearing. Of those 27, there are 26 that are in support of the rezoning and OCP amendment, and 1 that is not supportive of the OCP and zoning amendment. Those letters of correspondence have been provided to you, Mayor and Council, earlier today, and they will be available on the village's website tomorrow and included as part of the agenda or meeting minutes.
Great, thank you. Okay, with that, it's time to open it to the public. So members of the public are now invited to make their comments on the proposed bylaws. Again, please use the raise hand feature in your webinar controls. And don't forget to state your name and address and whether you support or oppose the proposed bylaw amendments.
Your Worship?
Yeah, go ahead.
Could we provide the proponents an opportunity to speak first prior to the public?
Yep. Let's
Sorry.
start there.
Okay.
And just a reminder for everybody that your comments will form part of the public record and will be noted in the public hearing minutes. So with that, I'll open the floor to the proponents.
Gwendolyn, that would include Guy Bonifay, Shafiq El Rassi, and Craig Burns.
Thanks. My name's Craig Burns, and I'm with Principal Architecture, and we are acting as the agent for School District 93 on this project. I just wanted to mention too that there's several others from the school district attending the meeting tonight. Michelle Saint-Amand, Superintendent of the CSF, Fariba Daragahi, the Assistant Superintendent, Simon Couture, Secretary Treasurer, and Shafiq El-Rassi, Director of Capital Planning. And I understand, I think the principal is attending as well from École Vallée, and other members of the CSF community in Pemberton. And thank you for the opportunity to just speak to the project. I think that Cameron's covered a lot of the details of the project, and the documentation is pretty thorough in terms of the intent. But yeah, we just wanted to add a little bit of flavor to the most recent correspondence. So École Vallée is already part of the community. It shares school facilities with Signal Hill Elementary and rents space from the community center. And so this project is really an opportunity to relieve the pressure on those facilities and create a new school with new facilities that can also be made available to the community, including some childcare space, which is much needed. The project is identified at the highest level of priority in the CSF's capital plan, and the Ministry of Education has been active and supportive in helping us move this project forward. And we have been working with Lisa Pedrini and Cameron Chalmers at the village to make sure that the priorities for the project are consistent with the community expectations. The CSF, like all school districts across the province, relies on Treasury Board approval for school funding for capital projects. And the approval process and the funding criteria are the same for all school districts. And this is obviously to ensure that public tax dollars are spent equitably across the province. And so we have worked to identify elements of this project that can provide value both to the school population and to the greater Pemberton community within this funding formula. And we've addressed many of the sort of specific challenges with this site within the funding formula. And those are well documented in the backup material. However, the cost for design and construction of that pedestrian bridge over Pemberton Creek doesn't fit easily into this funding formula. Essentially, the ministry that's funding schools does not typically accommodate something like a bridge over a creek. So that said, the CSF, along with the village, are intending to continue to work towards finding a solution that is a shared solution that addresses that need for a pedestrian bridge. And this was, as Cameron mentioned, clarified a little bit more specifically in the September 7th letter from the CSF. And with that, I think we're looking forward to continuing to work on this project and work towards building a new school in the village of Pemberton. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else from your team like to say anything? Good. Okay, thank you for that. And so again, I will open it up for public comment. Please hit the raise hand and staff will get you in the queue. And I'll look to Ms. Kennedy for direction when you have some.
Yes, Mayor Richmond, we have one raised hand.
Go ahead.
Oh, my name is Nicole Beness and I live at number 4, 7400 Arbutus Street in Pemberton. I didn't have time to submit a letter earlier, so I thought I would just read what I wrote this afternoon. I am in support of the Francophone School La Vallée being considered for the piece of land in Tayada. My children have attended La Vallée since 2013 and have had an incredible experience. which no doubt would only have been richer had they owned their own school as opposed to a few portables and a room in the community center. The heart of the school has been the amazing community of students, staff, and parents, but we've all longed for a facility to call our own, a home for our heart. It's only fair and equitable that the Francophone students of Pemberton have access to the same infrastructure and opportunities as the Anglophone students, such as a full-size gymnasium, library, kitchen, makerspace, and small group space, to name a few. The location is ideal. It allows the majority of students to walk or cycle to school and maintains a close connection to Signal Hill and PSS for inter-school opportunities. Extracurricular activities will also be easily accessible for students and equitable with opportunities being provided to our Anglophone students. Please allow the school to be built, as 17 years have been a long time to wait, and we feel like we are so close. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Benez. Ms. Kennedy, any more comments?
There is another hand raised, yes.
Go ahead.
Hello.
Hi there. We can hear you.
Hi, my name is Richard Doucette. I'm from 7402 Cottonwood Street. I'm a parent of 2 children in the La Vallée School. And I'm a proponent, or I'm in favor of the school being at the property and for this bylaw to move forward. It is a high priority school. And even though they may not have funding for the footbridge, I believe there's funding within the school for community amenities that can be built within the school. So this school will not only be an asset for the many families that already currently use the school, but it will be an asset to the community. So even though the footbridge may not be paid for by the school, there will be some benefits and community space within that school. So we must think about that. The other thing I wanted to mention was that just building a school for the village of Pemberton, having another school in this community will also allow the community to grow. So more families can move to this community. And this is an asset that is very close to being built. And I just wanted to put my 2 hands in for saying, yes, let's do it. And let's get this bylaw moving. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Doucette. Do you have any other public comment?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hello, can you
Hello.
hear me?
Sure can.
This is Christy Thomas. I am the president of the APE, the PAC essentially for École La Vallée. And we have been working so incredibly diligently and for so incredibly long on this project. And we are an incredibly resourceful and mighty group. And there will be probably 20 options of ways that we can fundraise and ultimately get this bridge built in some other creative fashion. If this is the singular holdup, it would be absolutely devastating if this were the single holdup in moving this school forward. It's been over 4 years in the making now, and we have amassed an incredible Francophone student body. And we're growing into a high school that not only Pemberton will use, but ultimately Whistler, École La Passerelle will not have a high school as we understand it. So this will be bigger than just our little community of Pemberton. And once again, we will be able to fundraise up a storm, and I'm sure come up with all sorts of creative ways to build that footbridge if there aren't other VOP funds or something along these lines. We know tons of builders, we know tons of excavation companies and folks who can do the work. Thank you very much for your support.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. Ms. Pedrini?
I was just going to mention that Christy didn't give us her civic address.
Thanks.
If she's still available to let us know her civic address for the record.
On the line, Gwendolyn?
She is still there.
Can you hear me now?
Sure can.
Okay, my civic address is 1771 Pinewood Drive, Pemberton, V0N2L3.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, do we have more public comment?
We do, yes.
So just a reminder for people to please provide their full name and civic address.
Bonsoir. Hi, my name is David Brosseau. I live at 1422 Willow Drive. I am in support of the new school. This is my third year as the principal of La Vallée, and I witness every day a thriving community, a great group of parents and families, and I believe that the new school will become even a greater hub for that community. But not only for the French families, I think through community use as a wider school in a bigger building, it will be used by everyone in Pemberton. And ultimately, I believe school do build bridges, and I'm sure we can build one together.
Thank you. I noticed in the chat section, there's a Mr. Saint-Amand that would like to speak. If you could just hit the raise hand if you haven't already done so, Mr. Saint-Amand, then we'll be able to get you in the queue. Do we have any more
Yeah.
waiting?
Just Michelle Saint-Amand now.
Perfect. Go ahead, sir, when you can.
Unmute. There you go.
There you go. We can hear you now.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Mayor, and good afternoon, Council. As well, good afternoon to the PAC members and David, the school principal. I'm Michel Saint-Amand, the superintendent of the SD 93. And I just want to tell you that how happy we are and how proud we are to have the chance today to speak to the council and seeing that actually you are looking to make our community and the community of Pemberton have a second language. I mean by that, French is one of the two official languages in Canada. So you're making Pemberton one of the city in BC where it's good to live. I'm talking to you from Vancouver downtown, so the unceded territories of the Musqueam. So and I'm myself Métis. So that school will be take part of actually 47 schools that we run throughout the province, K-12, with a daycare and of course some room and space for community activities. So the CSF is a 25 years old public school board. That's the known as the BC, let's say French language authority, and that's the French name Conseil scolaire francophone. And then as part of the community, we are happy to actually find a permanent home in Pemberton. As you know, we actually have portable behind another school and take you to the local school board to accommodate us. But like we said, it's more than time that we have a chance to have a full school, full services, and being part of the community. So thank you so much for the time you spent, and thank you for all the group. Thank you for my team that is here actually, and we'll look forward to have a chance to work together, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Saint-Amand. Are there any other comments from the public?
No, Mayor Richmond, there are no other raised hands.
I'll call for a second time then. Are there any other public submissions? And seeing none, I will call for a third time. Any further public comment?
No, there are no raised hands.
Okay, thank you very much. So on behalf of council and myself, I'd like to thank all of you who have attended this meeting. Your input and participation in the process is greatly appreciated. Please be advised that after the public hearing is adjourned, the opportunity for public discussion is ended and council may not hear from or receive correspondence from interested parties relating to these bylaws. These bylaws are now a matter for council's consideration based upon information received to date. This public hearing for Village of Pemberton Official Community Plan Amendment, Tayada, École de la Vallée, Bylaw 902, and Village of Pemberton Zoning Amendment, Tayada, École de la Vallée, bylaw number 903 is now adjourned. Thank you very much. Gwendolyn, do you need to make any tech adjustments, or are we able to keep rolling right on?
Yeah, if we could just stand by for just a minute.
You bet.
Gwendolyn, when you're ready, let us know.
Two seconds.
Are you good, Gwendolyn? Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, good to proceed now.
We've lost the mayor.
No such luck. Okay, we good to go?
Yes, we are. Sorry.
All right, I'm going to reopen the regular meeting. And in honor of the Liwato, the village of Pemberton acknowledges that we are meeting within the unceded territory of the Litwa Nation. For those members of the public in attendance, please note that this meeting is a live webinar and is being recorded. A recording of the meeting will be available on the village's website following the meeting. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Zant. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. So adoption, rise with the report from Karen. We don't have any. Adoption of minutes number 10 from regular council meeting 1544 from August 31st, moved by Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Craddock. Any opposed? Motion carries. Business arising from the previous regular council meeting, we do have 11A, that's the cancellation of the Litwa 2021 Bulls and Barrels Rodeo. Go ahead, Ms. Fraser.
I just wanted to advise council that you had made a commitment to provide funding from the Community Enhancement Fund upon receipt of information from Lilwat that the rodeo was not going to be taking place. Those funds have been reallocated back into the Community Enhancement Fund.
Okay. Any questions? Any other business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, motion receive. Councillor Zant, seconded by Councillor Noble. Any opposed? Motion carries. Business arising from the Committee of the Whole from August 31st, meeting 217. We have that the Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that staff be directed to work with the applicant for the proposed development of a co-living multifamily residential development located at 7340 Crabapple Court, which will include a separate development variance permit application for the requested parking variance. Can I get that motion? Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Zant. Any opposed? Motion carries. Go ahead, Councillor Antonelli. Sorry, you're on mute.
Yeah, I just wanted to, it kind of went quickly before we had any conversation there. I just wanted to mention it. The phrasing of it said it will include a variance. I just think, you know, we may have just passed this, it's too late, but I think that implies some kind of obligation there. And in our conversation, we all expressed concerns about the parking. So I just didn't really see that reflected in the wording.
Okay, that certainly wasn't the intent of the motion, as you say. The intent is to make sure that a separate development variance permit application is looked at so that there's a proper discussion about parking obligations.
Right. Yeah, I can just leave that, but I just wanted it noted that it was a big part of our conversation and the wording doesn't really reflect that. So if we can communicate that.
Sure. No, I would agree with that. And then Ms. Fraser, I think I've called the question, so I don't know we can actually amend that, but
You would have to rescind the resolution and reword it. You could rescind the resolution and just maybe create.
If we're able to communicate, are you happy with it remaining the same instead of unwinding it, Councillor Antonelli?
Yes.
Okay,
I
we
think
have already had preliminary conversation around this, so we will continue to express those concerns.
Yeah, as long as it's clear, I think Councillor Antonelli's point is valid, that all of council was pretty clear that there was concerns around the request for that size of a parking relaxation. Okay. And then we have summarizing report from today's in camera. You'll just have to give me a second. Okay, so the rising report from today's in committee of the whole, number 1545. The first is regarding the draft building bylaw. The recommendation from committee of the whole is that council recommend to council that staff be directed to proceed with stakeholder consultation regarding referencing the energy step code for part 3 buildings. And the second recommendation on that was that the committee of the whole recommend to council that Chris Derouin be appointed to the position of plumbing official for the village. Can I get a motion to that effect? I gotta go back. Councillor Zant, second by Councillor Noble. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. And then the next is around electronic meetings. So we have a number of recommendations here. The first is that committee of the whole recommend to council that staff seek a legal opinion with respect to whether the village can require council staff and the public to show proof of vaccination to attend council committee or commission meetings. Ms. Fraser, can I do these all at once, or you good with that?
Certainly.
Okay, good.
You may want to read them out for the benefit of.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna read them all out here.
Okay.
Got to go
Yep.
back and forth here. The second one is that committee of the whole recommend to council that Mayor Richmond bring forward a request from the village to use the SLRD board meeting for council, committee, and commission meetings. Third is that committee of the whole recommend to council that staff be directed to draft an amendment to council procedures bylaw number 788/2015 to permit electronic attendance at council, committee, and commission meetings for review at a future committee of the whole meeting. Fourth one is that committee of the whole recommends to council that staff be directed to present at a future meeting of council recommendations for meeting space along with suitable hardware and software for the facilitation of electronic meetings. And the last one is that the committee of the whole recommend to council that staff be directed to prepare a draft procedure bylaw in which council and staff may attend unlimited number of meetings by electronic means, and that upon adoption, the new procedures bylaw be brought back for review 6 months later. Somebody like to make that motion? Councillor Craddock, seconded by Councillor Zant. Any further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Right. Okay, so committee minutes, delegations, we have none. Staff reports, Office of the CAO, verbal report, CAO Gilmore.
I do not have any updates this evening.
Okay, then we're on to development services. 15B1, which is the major development permit number 88, the aspect for 1422 to 1430 Portage Road. And we'll wait for some staff to join us. Good evening again, Mr. Chalmers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council. If it's all right with you, I'd like to give a PowerPoint presentation as part of this submission. And good evening, Mayor and Council. The purpose of this report is for council to consider authorization of development permit number 88 for a project that has become known as the Aspect at 1422 to 1430 Portage Road. The The council may be familiar with this site. This site was in the past the site of an application known colloquially as the Crestline project. For a variety of reasons, that one never did proceed. But the application before you tonight is a rethink of that proposal. And it's effectively for 61 purpose-built rental apartment units over structured parking. As I'll describe in a moment or two, there are some variances that are required to accommodate the proposal. And some prior to obligations, which I'll describe in some detail that are outlined in the report. In terms of the site itself, the site is about 30,800 square feet or 2,864 square meters. It's appropriately designated and zoned in the OCP and zoning bylaw respectively for this sort of use in this sort of building. The development permit areas that the site has been assessed against that we'll describe and are outlined in detail in the staff report are the multifamily and or commercial development permit area guidelines. So quite a review has been undertaken of those, and there's a table in the staff report that outlines the compliance with those guidelines from a staff perspective. Currently, the site is disturbed, relatively flat as a natural in its natural state, but it has been disturbed from previous development efforts and it is vacant. Adjacent uses include the Portage Station mixed use building. To the south, there's the community center across Portage Road. Crown land borders it on the south and north sides, and that Crown land is currently undeveloped. As I mentioned, historically, this was the site of another project known as Crestline. Just before I get to the proposal summary itself, in terms of background, this application has gone through a customary review. It's been referred to relevant agencies, in this instance, MOTI as the authority governing the road and regulating the road, as well as internal departments. Those comments have been consolidated and communicated to the applicant, and the response has been provided. The application also did appear before the Advisory Design Review Commission, and their resolution is in your staff report. They raised 2 points. One was to make sure that the balcony railings are opaque or some other material such that the balcony contents can't be viewed from the street. And the second was to switch out the tree frontages from Japanese maples to a more suitable type. And those are, as we'll talk about in a moment, those recommendations have been incorporated. So the proposal itself is for a 39,000 square foot building, about 3,655 square meters. The building is 3 stories of apartment residential over structured parking. So the building raises a little bit from the street. The structured parking would sit just below street level. There's not an opportunity to go significantly below ground due to water table conditions. But the site just slopes from Portage Road. There's landscaping and ramping and other gradient efforts to try to minimize the impact of the building rising, but it will comply with height guidelines as we talk about. It will be accessed. The architect describes it as a contemporary form. The color palette is a matter that we did have conversations about, and this is the color palette that the applicant had stuck with. As we'll see on the site plan, the access is from Portage Road. I hope you can see my cursor. Based on MOTI requirements, the site has been limited to one access, and several iterations of the proposal did see potential for multiple access and perhaps circulation around the building. MOTI has determined that that's not an acceptable solution to provide multiple access to their road. So it's limited to one single access that will enter an underground or underbuilding parking tray. From there, residents will utilize elevator cores, which protrude slightly from the front of the building to provide some architectural relief to the frontage to access the upper stories of residential. In terms of building form and character, it is a pretty conventional 3-story building. This is the elevation drawing. There's been efforts undertaken to articulate the roof line of the frontage of the building in particular. The rear of the building has less articulation, but is significantly less visible from any perspective. The only visible perspective is seasonal during autumn and winter and early spring months from the highway. Some effort has been recently undertaken to add end caps to the building to frame it a little better and some articulation in the middle, but it's not an elevation of the building that generates significant view. It doesn't have significant view corridors necessarily. In terms of color and materials, there's a range of materials: asphalt shingles, hardy board, and brick siding. Colors and materials board has been presented. and provided. There's a photograph of that, even though I realize it's illegible in the bottom corner. But the materials generally are consistent with the types of materials in terms of durability that the village would expect. The colors and the color choices are the color choices put forward by the applicant. The landscaping on this project takes two different forms. There's on-site, off-site landscaping, which is inside the MOTI right-of-way, and it's similar to the approach taken at Portage Station and several of the other Portage Road fronting sites. This will enable a gentler transition between the sidewalk and the carriageway of the road and the building. So the building's set back quite far from the sidewalk. As you can see here, this red line bisecting the landscaping is the property boundary. So there's a fair bit of additional road allowance, which will be utilized for landscaping. It will include pedestrian ramps, as well as a variety of tree and shrub species to try and create a soft transition in a nice sidewalk form. That offsite landscaping, as I mentioned, will be in the MOTI right of way. And as we'll talk about in a minute, we're looking at different ways to secure that, the delivery of that landscaping. There's also an on-site landscaping, which again, because the building sits fairly close to the property boundary, there's less ability to do full landscaping on the site, but some plantings and minor trees are proposed as well. So the entire frontage, when you combine those two plans, staff deem is an acceptable landscape solution in an urban or semi-urban context. The zoning analysis, so the first stage of the zoning analysis is the building siting and height, building form and massing considerations. The application, as outlined in the staff report, does meet the maximum density requirements. It does meet the rear and interior setback requirements. It does meet the maximum building height requirements of the zoning bylaw for both the principal and the accessory structures. There are several variances that are requested to those considerations. The first is maximum lot coverage. I'll detail that in a second, but it's a fairly minor variance. And another is the minimum front setback for both the principal and the accessory buildings. And I'll detail that in just one second. The other variance that's requested, this is the parking analysis that was undertaken for the project. So this project, as an affordable housing project, is permitted to utilize a 0.25 stall per unit discount, which has been applied to this analysis. But even with that discount, the project would command 72 parking stalls. Given the limitations of the structured parking and the ability to provide suitable drive aisles, it's not large enough to provide 2 full drive aisles. They have worked and tried to squeeze out every stall, and the result is 61 stalls. So that's a variance of 11 stalls that would be required. So in summary, I'm missing a slide here. In summary, there's a number of variances that are required. I apologize, I missed a slide. It was in there a minute ago. There are a number of variances that are required. Those are outlined in the permit. The front yard setback, there's 2 different front yard setbacks variances that are required. One would be to accommodate the elevator cores, which staff supports due to the ability to use those features to articulate the building and provide some visual relief to an otherwise long frontage. There's a more significant variance down to 0.25 meters for the parking entrance, or the service entrance to the building. So this is where the recycling and waste facilities will be located. There'll be a garage door located in very close proximity to the property boundary. As a result of that, it requires a fairly significant variance. For both the front yard variances, staff do note that there is, again, considerable setback and landscaping between the sidewalk, the road, the carriage sidewalk is here, the carriageway of the road, and the front of the building. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to suggest one amendment recommendation for council to consider. So this is not in your staff report. In reviewing the final submission of the permit, we noticed that it wasn't clear that the ADRC recommendation for opaque safety railings or other means to eliminate visual access from the street to the balconies. We realized that wasn't clear. So we would ask that the first resolution that starts with that council amends development permit, and then this would add a new section 7 into the permit itself. The remainder of the resolution is as outlined in your staff report, and it would authorize issuance of the development permit subject to a number of conditions. These conditions, some of them are going to take some time and are fairly substantial. The first one is that the owner enter into a housing agreement with the village approved by bylaw to restrict the development to purpose-built rental for a minimum of 10 years from initial occupancy. As I mentioned in the analysis and in the processing of this application, the applicant has always represented this project as an affordable purpose-built rental. Purpose-built rental does meet the village definition of affordable. And as such, it would command a housing agreement. Because this is a development permit only and not subject to a rezoning application, we have had some preliminary discussions with the applicant about the housing agreement and the terms. The more substantive one is the duration. What the applicant has advised is that they will be pursuing BC Housing construction financing, which provides a number of indices about rents and the length of term. Those will all be put into a housing agreement presented to council by bylaw and completed before the final development permit is issued. So they will not be able to receive a building permit or do any works on the site until a housing agreement to council satisfaction has been completed. The second substantive condition, and council may recall this site, it was initially, even before Crestline, was phase 2 of the Portage Station building. And when Portage Station was constructed, it was deficient in 7 parking stalls for the commercial uses at Portage Station. At the time, the 2 sites were owned by the same owner. A covenant was put in place obliging the subject lands to provide 7 parking stalls for the benefit of Portage Station. There are a number of prospective solutions that are emerging to ensure that the applicant delivers those 7 parking stalls. Though that will have to be absolutely clarified and refined and approved by council before the development permit will be issued in its final form. So there's again some emerging possibilities. The applicant is aware, but given their program, they asked that despite those 2 fairly substantive conditions, that this item be brought forward to council. The third condition is the owner receive final approval from Ministry of Transportation regarding all aspects of the project that affect MOTI. So that will include on-site circulation and landscaping. The remaining 2, the next 2 conditions are the landscape bonding, and we've broken those into 2 different sections, one for on-site, which will be secured by letter of credit with the village in the amount of $106,900. The reason we've separated the $55,000 off-site landscape contribution is that we're not clear yet whether the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure will require bonding on their property. And if they do, we will make sure that that bonding secures the delivery of the landscaping. And if not, we will bond on behalf of the village. So in any event, all of the landscaping proposed as part of the project will be secured by bonding. And then the final condition, again, related to the landscaping, we need to make sure that because the landscaping will be located in a public roadway, that there's a mechanism to obligate the owner to maintain the landscape in perpetuity. We've customarily in the village, that would be an agreement entered into between the village and the proponent. In this case, we have to work with MOTI to determine whether or not the village is the sole party to that agreement, or it's the village and MOTI and the proponent. But in any event, the final development permit will not be issued until such time as there's an agreement to make sure that the village and MOTI are not responsible for the ongoing maintenance of the landscape and the frontage. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'd be open to any questions that council may have in respect of this development permit, but we are seeking an amendment to the initial recommendation in your staff report as shown on this slide. And then the balance of the recommendation, the second half, is as presented in the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chalmers. Do we need the screen share up, or can we take that down so I could see everybody for now? We might need you to come back to that amended staff recommendation after.
That's certainly fine.
Thank you for the presentation. Let's stick to questions to start. Are there questions for staff on this presentation? Councillor Craddock, go ahead.
Thanks very much, Mayor Richmond. Through to Mr. Cameron, Mr. Chalmers, I'm sorry. Number 2, the additional 7 parking spaces, is that over and above the 11 they're asking for relaxation on?
Mr. Mayor, through you, yes, they're separate issues. The 11 variances would be what they would be required to provide for their building, and it makes an assumption that there will be another means to deliver the 7 parking stalls they're obligated to provide by covenant in another form. So on another site within acceptable distance to the proposal.
Then if I might follow up with that, if that's the case, is there a potential for part of the 11 that they're short, that they maybe will add that to the 7 they're looking for?
Mr. Mayor, through you, we have not explored offsite parking in this instance. The rationale for that is that there is a minimum, there's at least 1 stall per unit proposed. And typically the offsite or the purchase parking stalls would be done for a commercial use. And this building is strictly residential. If council wants us to entertain those discussions, we certainly can, and you could refer the application back to us to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Chalmers.
Questions? Anyone else? We've got a couple questions. So there's no drive access to the rear of the building, correct?
Mr. Mayor, through you, that the initial proposal did have an access around the back, and the initial proposal did include 7 parking stalls for the benefit of the neighbor. That was, first off, there are some grade challenges between this proposed building and the neighboring property, and the ability to get the grade difference down to street level in a reasonable manner. So there were some topographic challenges that we were working through with the applicant, and then MOTI intervened and advised the applicant that they would be limited to 1 access point, which it doesn't make it possible to get circulation around the building.
I was thinking of more in terms of emergency access. I'm wondering from a firefighting standpoint, how our fire chief feels about that, and how this impacts potential firefighting on the site.
Mr. Mayor, through you, the building will require sprinkling and some other things. I know the fire chief typically does have that comment. When we reviewed the internal referral comments, there is the ability for the building to be accessed from the front. It's not a massive site, but it will not have rear firefighting access. There's no practical means to deliver it in its current form.
And so we'll hear from the fire chief on his comments on that at a further stage, or?
Mr. Mayor, through you, know what we did with the internal comments was reconciled them internally. We addressed the ones that were viable and possible, but the planning department brought this forward as is. There's not a solution to have complete access all the way around.
Okay. Other questions? Where has the proponent offered any other potential solutions to reducing the parking, or asking for reduction in parking, i.e. car sharing or anything like that? Has that come up as part of the conversation?
Mr. Mayor, through you, no, it has not. No.
Okay, and I had a similar question to Councillor Craddock in terms of, is there the ability to perhaps some of the, if they're looking for a relaxation of 11 parking spots, is there the ability for some of those to be looked at as parking in lieu or some other solution? But I think you've answered that. And then I guess my last question at this point is, I think you already partially answered it, but how did we land on a 10-year term for rental dedicated only for the housing agreement? How do we get to 10 years?
Mr. Mayor, through you, that is the applicant's proposal. At this stage, we have not had fulsome conversations about the housing agreement. That's a separate discussion to have with council. So what I've relayed to you is their proposal, and it's based on the minimum requirements for the BC Housing Construction Finance Program. So we did exchange initial term sheets with the applicant, but we do not have it resolved at this stage, but are here seeking authorization for issuance of the DP. So the applicant's rationale is that we'd have some comfort in the ability to move forward with the project and have those bigger conversations, knowing that should they be successful, there will be a project at the back end. So
I lied, I have 2 more questions. So I know there was change in legislation probably about a year back, if not more now, I've lost track of time, that allows municipalities to zone dedicated rental into dedicated rental zoning forever, in perpetuity. I just you know, I'm going to bring, when it comes time for comments, I have some thoughts in terms of the 10-year agreement for dedicated rental. I'd just like to know what council's options are if there is an appetite for ensuring that the dedicated rental stays beyond 10 years.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, through you, the housing agreement would guarantee the 10-year rental. The other most significant prohibition in the housing agreement will be a prohibition against strata titling the building. So what that means is that when the building is occupied, it will be one legal entity. It will not be strata titled. That makes it a rental only building. There's, you know, aside from extremely complicated fractional ownerships, which don't usually happen, it would mean that it would be a rental building. And unless and until council approved a strata conversion of the building. So if at the end of the 10-year requirement, the applicant wanted to look at strata titling the building to sell individual units, that would require a council approval to strata title the building. So despite the term in the housing agreement, perhaps the stronger leverage that council has is that council approval for future strata titling. And when doing so, the act outlines several considerations that council must take into account, one of which is the priority of rental versus ownership housing. So that's one option. The rezoning option wasn't explored because this project didn't trigger a rezoning application. It complies with the current zoning bylaw in terms of use and most of the zoning regulations. So if it had come forward and required a rezoning, that's a discussion we likely would have had. You are correct that the rental only zoning it is a great tool that I'm sure the village will use at some point, but it's not one that was triggered in this instance. It's a development permit only application.
Okay, and so the last question is, in terms of rental rates, establishment of rental rates through the housing agreement, it references the BC housing rates. What do we have a chance, or where in the process will we have a chance to look at those rates, really understand them, and make sure that we're offering something that is by some definition affordable?
Mr. Mayor, through you, should the application proceed as recommended by staff, we will come forward at some point in the future with a housing agreement term sheet, likely to a committee of the whole. And council will be at that point able to address all of the relevant considerations for the housing agreement, including rental rates. And we'll have to get through a housing agreement process before this development permit could be actioned. So no, it would not be completed. So council would have several, I imagine at least several opportunities to comment specifically on the affordable housing component, including the tenure, the type and nature of the restrictions, and so on. What we have brought forward, though, I think is a fair representation of the applicant's ask, which is a 10-year prohibition. It's a market rental project, but if they access the BC housing financing, there are some indexes that are used to establish rent rates. So that would likely be the starting point that I'm quite certain they would ask to be brought forward for council review.
And so, sorry, with that said, then, you know, if it came to things like looking at other options and back to parking now, like a ride share or anything like that, at what point would we engage the proponent to see if they would be willing to provide that? Is that at this point, or is that through the housing agreement?
Mr. Mayor, through you, I would suggest that's probably, I mean, the variance in the parking allotment, the number of parking stalls is a matter of development permit. The development permit only does not trigger an amenity contribution or those sorts of negotiations. Typically, we could look at including that as part of the housing agreement, perhaps, or as an adjunct to the housing agreement negotiations. But at this point, in consideration of the development permit, we'd be considering just the number of parking stalls available to the project.
Okay, thanks. No more questions from me. Anybody else got some questions before I open it for comment? Seeing none. Anybody like to provide comment on the proposal? Somebody? Here you go, Councilor Craddock.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I like the proposal. I think it'll look great on the entry to our downtown core. I guess just like another proposal earlier to council, parking always becomes an issue, and we're 11 short on this building plus 7 that they're going to find a space for that they owe on the property next door. I hate to keep going back to parking, but at the end of the 10-year time frame, if they do come to the council at that day and they decide to strata title, then I would see a huge concern with the diminished amount of parking. So, gosh, I hate to tie up these properties for parking issues, but we have had letters come to us regarding issues in the neighborhood. So I don't know what Mr. Chalmers could say about the potential to find an increase in those numbers, but I think the neighborhood would be a little concerned about the loss of that parking.
Thank you, Councillor Caddick. Do you have any response to that, Mr. Chalmers? Or shall I move on?
If you like, Mr. Mayor, I can say that I think we've worked exhaustively with the applicants and they've eked out every potential viable parking stall under the footprint of the building. And with the inability to provide any surface parking limited to one access point, I don't foresee any additional parking stalls on the site.
And what about the ability to work on parking in lieu and offsite parking? Does staff see that as an opportunity to alleviate some of the concerns?
It could. Again, offsite parking for residential is typically not a solution that works well. It's not one that we would typically entertain. And in this case, we simply looked at the requirement that there be at least one stall per unit. So this is different than some of the other recent variance discussions councils had, which have looked at units that would not have eligible assigned parking. This would be one stall per unit. But if council directed, we could certainly look at other options or in lieu contributions.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it could be the visitor parking, could be offsite or something like that. Go ahead, Councillor Caddick.
Yeah, thank you. Just to follow up, if you don't mind, Mayor Richmond, to Mr. Chalmers. Mr. Chalmers, the width of the parking, is there any available way to reconsider the size of them, or is that even something that's an option?
Mr. Mayor, through you, there's a number of parking stall dimension requirements that have been considered. The conventional stall dimension, again, there will likely be some structures and supporting structure that's required. I don't think that minimizing that would provide ample parking. They've maxed out in the application the number of small car stalls permitted. And there are also setbacks from fixed walls and other fixed wall structures, which is impinge them. The real issue is that they don't have sufficient space to create two double loaded drive aisles. If they did, then there'd probably be an oversupply of parking. But in this instance, just given the size of the site, they've maxed out as much as they can. They do have two drive aisles, one of which is single loaded with parallel parking. So I'm quite confident they've eked out as much as they can. And just I would be remiss if I didn't say again, when we look at parking variances for individual buildings, we need to consider parking in the context of the area. And I realize that there's some concerns in the area generally, and there's some limited parking, but there's other opportunities that may present themselves that we could look at as well. So I think that's part of the consideration to address the 7 stalls that that have to be located elsewhere. And in finding that location, there may be an opportunity to add more or to ensure that there's ample parking for that region.
More comments from council? Right, Councillor Antonelli.
Yeah, well, I think it's good to see this proposal come forward, and I think the building looks pretty good. I like the articulation on the front, and I'm really happy to see a rental proposal. That said, I have parking concerns. We've heard recently from the neighbors that the whole neighborhood has parking issues, and I think providing 61 parking stalls for 61 units means that there's no visitor parking, and their visitors will be parking elsewhere. And I need to know, where that is, because we already know there's a problem in the neighborhood. So for me, I really feel like I have to represent the existing residents of Pemberton and make sure those needs are met. I do, it's rental housing, so I do support a parking variance of some sort, but it can't be, a real negative for the neighborhood. A few other ideas I had, just thoughts. Generally the smaller variances I don't mind, for the footprint and whatnot. But the garbage kiosk on the street without any setback to me doesn't really speak to me aesthetically. I think this is Pemberton's main drag, and we need to maintain some kind of setback there. I also wonder how the garbage truck would function there. I'd like to see the slightest bit of green space on the property where people can use it communally. So, a bench and 100 square feet of pavers, just so that there's some communal space for people to speak to their neighbors. It doesn't have to be big, but it's still really important. I wonder about snow storage. The landscaping is going to be on the MOT setback, and so I'm wondering where the snow is going to go. And let's see about the affordability. So I looked up what the BC Housing middle income range was, and for a 1-bedroom apartment, it's $116,000 a year. And for a 2-bedroom apartment, it's $163,000 a year. So I wonder if we're quite capturing the affordability that Pemberton is looking for by looking at what the middle income folks can afford, particularly in context of giving parking, less parking because of the affordability. I think you really have to weigh the two and know more about what that affordability actually is. And let's see. Lastly, the 7 parking stalls from the neighboring development. I really have to know where that's going before I could approve further variances. We've seen from our past files that putting off these solutions just doesn't work. We lose out every time we're put under pressure to approve things we don't want to approve because it's after the fact. Well, the permit's already pretty much issued, that kind of thing. So I really need, for me to support this, the whole parking picture needs to be provided. So that said, I think this site has a lot of potential. It's, I like their design, but I would suggest they go back for a little bit more review to cover those items off a bit better.
Thank you. Any other comments? Oh, go ahead, Councillor Noble.
I share the rest of council's concerns about the lack of parking spaces. We've all heard a lot of feedback from the community that there's already a shortage in existing buildings and neighborhoods. So that's my biggest concern with this building.
Thank you. Right. Go ahead, Councillor Zant.
Just wanted to follow up with your question in regards to the access for fire department at the rear of the building. I'm just looking at the layout here, and at the very least, is the fire department able to exit by foot with hoses to get to the back of the building? Is that even possible?
So again, if you could just review how the fire chief weighed in on this, Mr. Chalmers, Ms. Gilmore.
I'll just need a moment to pull up the referral. Just give me a second.
If I may, as well, while they're looking into that, I do share council's concerns about the parking as well, and Councilor Antonelli's concerns about where the garbage bins would be. It's an interesting point that is the front, that is front of the building on the main drag. There's great defense of it. So anyways, sorry, Mr. Chalmers, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, through you, apologies for the delay. Just I've lost it here. I will recite the fire department comments. The fire department concerns are the first one, fire hydrant location. The fire hydrant suggested in the drawing is across the street at the community center. So at building permit stage and servicing, they'll be required to provide a new fire hydrant as part of the waterworks. Location of walkway landscaping may not provide enough room in case of having to ladder the building. That's a comment that we looked at and discussed with the building official as well. This is not a unique building. It's not a distinct building. The fire chief also then asked for landscaping plans to be fire smart. Amendments were made to the landscape plans in response to that comment. And the building will have to be sprinklered as well as all the balconies. So that will be imposed at building permit. So really a lot of the concerns of the fire chief are ones that are more pertinent to building permit. The laddering of the building, again, it's a comparable condition to Portage Station, albeit 1 story taller perhaps. So there was not a specific comment in this round of comments that I'm seeing here about requiring full access around the building. And again, when we look at these larger buildings in other municipalities, that's not typically a requirement to have unencumbered access entirely around a building. And Mr. Mayor, if I may, just one process comment, just to clarify the recommendation. Before the final development permit is issued, so before they can actually do anything, we're not asking council to approve a development permit tonight. Council doesn't typically approve them at the council meeting. They authorize them for issuance. And what that would mean is that in this one, before the final permit is issued, there would have to be resolution to the 7 parking stall matter. That's a council matter, so that would have to come to you under separate cover. So council will have all of the details in relation to those 7 parking stalls and perhaps any others before the permit could be issued. Likewise, for the affordable housing, the details of that are not known at this stage, but as I mentioned before, until those details are approved by council, the development permit cannot be actioned. And just one final comment on the garbage enclosure. It's not an open air garbage enclosure. It's built into the parking structure and has a wooden sliding door. So again, it is set back some distance from the sidewalk. It's not immediately fronting the sidewalk, as there is a fairly substantial or robust landscape strip between the sidewalk and the front face of the garbage enclosure. So that's why staff are prepared to support it at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chalmers. Actually, I had a question on that originally. So a follow-up to that, it's enclosed. Where does the truck pick up the dumpsters? Do they get pushed out into the middle of the road, or how do they get loaded out by the?
Mr. Mayor, through you, there is some drive aisle. That is one of the specific concerns that staff are concerned about and have mentioned to the proponent. It's been raised by MOTI, and MOTI will have to be satisfied with the internal circulation as outlined in the conditions in our staff recommendation. MOTI has to be satisfied. So typically MOTI doesn't take too kindly to the blockage of travel lanes. So there'll have to be some additional metric work done there before the development permit could be issued.
Okay, so we will see more detail on how that's going to work.
Mr. Mayor, through you, that would be an MOTI approval. Once staff received the MOTI approval, that condition would be checked. That one, unlike the affordable housing, which is necessarily a council bylaw, and the parking covenant, which is necessarily a council review of the covenant and the satisfaction of that covenant, this one would not come to council, but MOTI and staff would have to be satisfied that there's ample circulation and movement.
Thank you. So my comments, I'm like others, I'm very happy about the idea of a dedicated rental building. I think it's very much necessary and it's a good site for it. And so I'm excited by that. I don't mind the design. I find it a little bit plain. I think there could be more articulation, honestly, but I know we as council are not here to be designers. But that's my sense on it. It looks like an apartment building in pretty much any town. So I'd like to see a little more creativity in it, but that's just me throwing that in there. With regard to the garbage, the fact that it's enclosed, and covered with a wood door. From the design perspective, I'm okay with it. I still have concerns about how it gets emptied and that it doesn't block circulation or create any risks along the Portage Road. For me, within the housing agreement, before I would approve a housing agreement, and therefore the next steps on the, I want to see in the housing agreement something more than 10 years. Honestly, I'd like to see in perpetuity that it be rental dedicated. I would consider at the least, 20, 25 years. But I feel like we need the dedicated rental desperately now, and that need is only going to grow over time, and that we have the ability to secure it within this agreement. So I would like to see us come back with an agreement, a stronger agreement that makes sure that that is dedicated rental for many years to come. I would also like to explore within that housing agreement exactly what affordable rent and entry-level rents are going to look like. If the proponents are asking for any parking relaxations in the name of affordable housing and are working with BC Housing, I want to make sure that it is affordable and that it is affordable for a long time or forever. So I want to make sure that that's locked up within the housing agreement. With regards to the parking, I think we're all on the same page. We want to see those 7 spaces accommodated somewhere else. I'm happy to look off-site and receive money parking in lieu if that makes sense. With regards to the 11 spaces that are being asked for relaxation within the development, I feel similarly to most of council. I do recognize, or I do believe that, when we're looking at these sorts of buildings, there are, recognizing where we are, we're a rural community, all that stuff. But when we build these sorts of developments, they should be, and are less car dependent. And if we keep building massive parking lots, and if we keep building spaces for parking everywhere and make it easy for people to drive from place to place to place, then we're just going to continue encouraging car culture. So I think we need to dance the delicate dance as a council and be open to parking reductions for a number of reasons, to make our climate action goals, to reduce GHGs in our community. We know cars are the biggest source. So if we put into, it's a holistic approach. It's walkable trails, it's a walkable downtown, it's, parking in one area, centralized areas so people can move about. It's building developments that aren't car dependent. So I am willing to consider some relaxation for sure on the parking. I would like us to consider some of that parking relaxation to be looked at off-site. I think there is potential for that. I would like the proponent to maybe propose some ideas to also help alleviate the parking concerns like car share. But I think again, the dance we do right now is, okay, it's affordable housing. That comes with a consideration around parking. What do we get back for the community? What I want to get back for the community is as much affordable housing as possible, and dedicated rental in perpetuity. Those, to me, that's a good trade-off if we can make other accommodations for parking. So I want us to consider that. So yeah, I think that would be my thoughts on it. Anybody else want to throw in again before we start looking at recommendations? Go ahead, Mr. Genie.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate your comments. As we have brought to this council before, there's definitely a balancing act that council has to take part in if you want to facilitate affordable and dedicated rental housing. We can't expect the parking requirements for a traditional apartment building to be fulfilled through these developments. The feasibility economically just doesn't exist. And as part of council's affordable housing action plan, there was the strategic direction to consider means to support and incentivize purpose-built rental housing. This is the kind of housing our community needs. And again, I would be very remiss if I didn't mention again the climate action repercussions of a car-centric style of development. This location sits on a transit line, is within walkable distance of our community center, our medical clinic, our downtown, our schools, etc. If we don't bend our strict interpretation of what kind of parking our new developments in Pemberton require, and realize that this will be a rental building. It's not going to be, I mean, it will be targeted for lower income families. Perhaps 1 car per unit is enough. They also have to provide bike parking at this location as per our bylaw. We purposely gave an incentive through our zoning bylaw to remove the visitor parking requirements for dedicated affordable housing buildings and rental housing buildings that use a housing agreement. So I would just encourage council to keep these points in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Virginie. There's some good clarity there, and yeah, I get that's some of where I was going. I think you know, the reduced parking, visitor parking is a tool we have, one of the few tools we have to negotiate and ensure that we get affordable housing. So I'm happy to consider it, and I'm happy to consider options to alleviate the impacts of that reduced parking. Anyone else? Okay, let's start working our way towards a motion and look at the recommendations then. We've heard some good comments, and let's see how we can incorporate them. So, right, we got to start with the amended recommendation. So the first one is that council amends development permit number 88 as presented by adding the following as clause 7. That the permittee shall ensure that all residential balconies are screened by opaque safety railings or other means to eliminate visual access to any residential balcony. That council off. Let's wait on that other part. Do we want to, sorry, just for process here, there's going to be a few elements to this. Do we want to break it down one resolution at a time? So for instance, that recommendation from the RUC.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, these are not linked recommendations. So the first one would just simply add something into the permit that was not included as an oversight. So.
All right, so keep that up there for now. Then let's start at the beginning. So the first recommendation is that council authorize development permit 88 for issuance for lands located 1422 to 1430 Portage Road. Legally described as lots 1 to 3, subject to the following prerequisites of final issuance. So the first is the owner shall enter into a housing agreement approved by bylaw to restrict the proposed development to purpose-built rental for a minimum of 10 years for initial occupancy. Personally, I would support that recommendation with more than 10 years. I would like to see either in perpetuity or 20 to 25 years. What's the rest of council's thoughts on that? One. Councillor Noble, then Councillor Craddock.
I'd like to see it in perpetuity too.
Councillor Craddock.
Yeah, if we had a longer period of time and we knew it wasn't going to eventually be strata titled, then I may be able to move somewhat on the parking restrictions, but 10 years, like yourself, is not long enough.
So would you like to go along with Councillor Noble and put in perpetuity or in 20-year term?
I'll wait to hear from the other councillors and Mr. Chalmers first.
Okay, I've got Councillor Zanton, Councillor Antonelli, Mr. Chalmers. Do you have some clarity to help?
Mr. Mayor, through you, just one concern I want to bring council to. We haven't discussed the term in detail with the applicant. The recommendation was specifically put forward as a minimum of 10 years. I don't know that if a jump to perpetuity is something, because we haven't had any negotiations, whether that's viable for a project like this to finance on. Again, there's significant financing implications for those types of decisions. What may be a solution is we could bold the word minimum and provide a subsequent resolution that council would encourage the applicant to explore a longer term. But to set a benchmark in that condition that we haven't explored, I don't know what the implications of that on the project may be. So to absolutely capture council sentiment is great, but I'm not sure that the proposed recommendation you're putting forward will do that, because this will have to come back to council. And a separate recommendation directing us to come back to committee of the whole with a revised term sheet for a longer term, or a justification for the term would probably be a better approach, and we'll deal with that separately.
Thank you for that. Councillor Zant.
My comment was just to align with Councillor Noble, making the rental term into perpetuity, but considering what Mr. Chalmers said, we can go from there.
Thank you. Councillor Antonelli.
I was just going to say that 10 years does seem short for the rental term, but I don't know that I would put in there perpetuity. I think I would prefer it to come back to council for review periodically, because when a building is rented, you don't know what it'll look like in 20 years, and maybe, you know, an influx of new owners could benefit the building in 20 years. So I think rental in perpetuity makes a lot of assumptions about how the building will be in 20 years.
Okay. So without going further into that part of the discussion, I'm happy to leave Mr. Chalmers' suggestion, and that we keep the wording in there that it is a minimum of 10 years, and that will definitely be a topic for discussion when the housing agreement comes back to council, and that staff could pass on to the applicant our desire to see a stronger rental commitment. Number 2 is that the owner shall develop a means to satisfy the offsite parking obligation to provide 7 additional parking stalls to the satisfaction of the Village of Pemberton. I think everybody's expressed that concern, and is everybody comfortable that that's covered there? All good. Number 3 is that the owner shall receive final approval from MOTI regarding proposed development and proposed landscaping. Then we get into the landscaping bonds. And number 6 is that the owner enter into an agreement with the Village of Pemberton under the Ministry of Transportation, obligating current and future owners to maintain that landscaping. And then we have the addition of number 7. Can you bring that back up, please?
Mr. Mayor, just for clarity, the first resolution was not to add a condition. It was to actually create a new number 7 in the permit. It just coincidentally had the number that follows in sequence after the condition. So by passing the first resolution, we will amend the permit itself. So it would not be a new condition. It would be a permit requirement.
Okay. So maybe then going back, there's nowhere within these 6 recommendations anything to speak to the 11 parking space relaxation.
Mr. Mayor, the variances are included in the permit. So by authorizing issuance of the permit, you would be authorizing the variances as well. That's the
That
tool.
will come after we've seen the housing agreement, et cetera.
Now, should council want additional information on the potential to provide additional offsite parking spaces in addition to the 7, council could amend the resolution that requires the 7 offsite parking stalls by covenant to say the 7 offsite parking stalls required by covenant plus additional parking stalls to offsite the variance request. That's something that, again, because that matter has to come back to council, that might be an opportunity for this to at least get authorized for issuance and then continue on the parking discussion, albeit more broadly than just the 7 stalls required by the covenant.
So I don't want to be too prescriptive on the 11 spots either. I would like staff to work with the proponents to consider offsite options, to consider other options, i.e. car share or anything else that they might propose to help alleviate some of the concerns around parking. Personally, I agree with the comments around, you know, we're on a transit hub and all that sort of stuff. But I think I would like to hear from the proponent how they could also help alleviate some of the concerns around the parking. So I'm assuming that that's captured in there.
Mr. Mayor, through you, I would suggest that would become a new condition number 7.
Okay.
That staff report back to council on options to offset the parking variance as part of the overall parking requirement. So that would be a new condition. I would suggest it becomes condition number 3 or number 3. And then we'd renumber the condition. There's 2 concurrent parking requirements. One is a report back on the 7 stalls, and one is a report back on options to offset the variance.
Is everybody comfortable with that? Does that address our concern? Somebody like to move all that as presented? Councilor Craddock, seconded by Councilor Noble. Further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Great. That's good work. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chalmers, Ms. Pedrini. That was very helpful.
Can you please note that I opposed that?
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you, Councilor Antonelli. I didn't see that. Councilor Antonelli is
Yeah,
opposed.
I actually asked for just another moment to speak, but that's fine. I
No,
did
I can
oppose
back
that.
it up. I totally didn't see you on there, so we'll call it a tech glitch here. I did not see your hand at all, so I'll back it up a second here and let's have your comments.
Well, my comments were that we see over and over again that giving our tentative approval or significant approval and then resolving issues brings us problems, ongoing problems. And so I'm opposed because we really need to sort out the parking issue up front and know what our solutions are before we're approving this DP design. So that's why I'm opposed.
Okay, thank you for that. And so I'll back up calling the question then, because I didn't see any of that. No, I can't do that.
No, you can't do that, or it's refusal, I believe, of the.
Okay, right. Sorry.
Yeah.
Ms. Pedrini? Ms. Pedrini, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to back up, sorry, just on the matter of the term of the housing agreement. Obviously, we will be dealing this through a separate bylaw, and so we will have the opportunity to discuss. But in earlier correspondence to the applicant, his feelings were on having the term be in perpetuity. And
mute. We're getting a lot of feedback. Can everybody mute, please? Everybody but Lisa. Go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, I'll try again. So just wanted to let you know that in an earlier correspondence with the applicant, I had, no, can't hear me?
You're garbled.
I think it's you, Lisa.
Not sure why.
Mr. Craddock, can you just mute to make sure it's not you? I'll do the same. Try one more time, Lisa.
Does Nikki want to mute?
I think it's.
Okay, how do I sound now? Bad? Okay.
Okay, give it a quick try. Try to summarize your comments. We could half hear you, see what we can make out here. So go for it quickly.
The applicant is open to extending the term from 10 years to in perpetuity through an earlier correspondence.
That's good to know. Thank you. Okay. Any further comment? Councilor Antonelli, I apologize. I didn't catch you earlier. I really didn't see you there. Your opposition is noted. Anything else? Okay. We're ready to move on then. So we're going on to 15B2, which is the regional growth strategy, the revised regional context statement. Ms. Pedrini, are you reporting on that? Hopefully.
Yes. Sorry, I just need to find my agenda, which I seem to have lost in the shuffle. Dear. Okay, I'm going to wing it. I don't have my agenda in front of me. So the purpose of the report, can you hear me? Oh.
Have you done something differently with your microphone or?
No, I did this the other day when I was on a Zoom call with someone as well. It's just the internet.
Okay.
I haven't touched anything. I'm not sure how you'd like me to proceed.
I'm not sure either. Can the rest of council make Lisa out okay, or give it a try? Let's give it a try here. Hopefully we can make you out.
Okay, The purpose of the report is to gain council's acceptance of a revised regional context statement that is required for the newly approved regional growth strategy. Everything's in the report.
Do you want to just take a second and pull it up? I mean, you could go online and get it. You wanted
Yeah.
to share some more details?
Well, I'd love to, but I'm just not sure if you can hear me.
Yeah, I think it could be pretty painful if she takes us all
Okay.
through like this. Let me ask this question to council. Having read the report in your agenda, are you looking for much more information from staff, from Lisa, or do you have some questions we would like to try to address here? If we have lots of concerns, I would suggest that maybe we have to defer this to the next meeting until Lisa's ready to go. I don't know if we have that timeline, but.
No, it has to be to the regional district by October 1st, I think. Is that what it?
Perhaps Ms. Pedrini could come to my office, and because I don't have any noise.
Okay.
Would that work?
Love it.
Okay.
Thank you. I don't see why we want to get back to in-person meetings though. Like, this is great.
No, there's no reason for it at all.
You have I have a quick question. Is there a map that goes with this?
Oh, here it is. Okay.
Lisa, is there a map attached to this report?
Okay, you should be able to.
No, there's no map.
Can they hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Totally. Way better.
Okay, great. Okay, so the purpose of the report is to present an updated regional context statement to council prior to our submission to the SLRD board for their consideration of acceptance. So basically, the Local Government Act requires that every 5 years, regional districts update their regional growth strategies. And within 2 years of that update, all member municipalities must provide a revised regional context statement that demonstrates how our OCP policies meet the goals and strategic directions of the RGS, and if they don't, how they will come into compliance or how they will strive to meet those goals and objectives. So there's been a lot of work put into the appendix to basically compile the requirements or the recommendations of the regional growth strategy and a comparison of what we currently have for policies in our official community plan. I would say in general, there is a lot of compliance. However, there's definitely some areas that we need to address. And given that we are launching our official review or of our official community plan next month, I will strive to ensure that all of our goals and strategic directions in our official community plan will meet the regional growth strategy directions. So if you wanted to let me know if you had any questions about any specific statements that are in the table of concordance that are attached as Appendix A. I'd be happy to answer those questions, but I'm not going to go through the bulk of that table.
Please don't. No, that's great. Thank you. So, I mean, just to clarify, at this point, you know, and I'm about to make more questions or comments about our OCP review, but up to this point, the RGS changes are in line with our smart growth and climate action goals as laid out by our OCP at this point. Do you feel that they're well aligned?
Correct. So, you know, before this, we had to develop a regional context statement that is a part of our official community plan. And we had to submit that to the SLRD for acceptance. That was done for our 2011 official community plan. But because the regional growth strategy has now been revised and updated and actually contains 2 new goal statements, one around climate change and the other around food security, if we have any gaps in our current official community plan, then we must strive to amend our official community plan. And we let the SLRD know that through a revised regional context statement. So I know it's a bit kind of confusing, but basically, yeah, so we're expected, along with all the other member municipalities, to provide a revised RCS, or regional context statement. The SLRD board is going to be looking at these in October, so next month. We have a time limit of 2 years from the date of approval of the revised RGS, which happened 2 years ago, October. And so unfortunately, the timeline for this statement, that's why I needed to present it to you tonight. If council would need to give us the go-ahead as staff to send this over to the SLRD board for acceptance. And just for your information, prior to bringing forward this report and table of concurrence to you for your review, I did pass it by Claire Dewar from the SLRD, the RGS planner. She's had a thorough review of it and was happy, had no, didn't see any outstanding issues or any missing language within this table, and felt it was adequate and more than adequate. She's happy with it. And she was very happy to see that some of the gaps that I recognized, that I made the commitment that they will be addressed during the OCP review. For example, the new strategic direction of actioning climate, or what is it, sorry, take action on climate change. We're obviously in the midst of preparing our own community climate action plan, and we will use the information gathered through that process to inform our OCP review. That will include new GHG targets for the Village of Pemberton, as well the new goal of protect and enhance food systems. The village has been involved in some regional food security committees. I'm a member of 2 separate groups that are looking at those issues. And from that representation of the village on those groups, I will use that information to inform the new OCP. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of topics obviously covered during our official community plan review. But this gives me a guideline of all the specific topics that must be covered in order to conform with the SLRD RGS.
Thank you. It's a very clear answer. Any questions from Ms. Pedrini? Go ahead, Councillor Caddick, and then Councillor Antonelli.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Pedrini. The blue sections are the new areas that are being added to the RCS, is that right?
The blue font is how our OCP currently meets the regional growth strategy strategic directions. So we've pulled out specific policy statements from the OCP, from the current OCP, and those are noted in blue. There is also some statements there which would say, you know, that we have been working on this and we will use this information to update the new OCP. But a lot of the statements are already in our current OCP.
Okay, and we're going to start rewriting that OCP as soon as we have our new manager in place. So
yes, I'm raring to go. So my new role with the village begins October 3rd. And I'm going to be on very focused task of rewriting the OCP.
Okay, because there are some things in the OCP that I had issues with, like, for instance, the first blue line, ensure there is sufficient land and resources for future settlement. I'm not sure how we can ensure that will ever happen because all the land in our community has been bought up for development. So The other thing I have an issue with is preserve and facilitate the enhancement of productive farmland. Well, as you just have to drive up the valley and see, there's more and more properties being bought for huge money and the properties aren't being used at all. So I guess those are some of the issues I have, and some of those issues on farmland are SLRD problems, not ours. But it certainly is something I think we need to attend to, but I can see you're just ready to chomp on the bit and get going on that. So I'll leave that to you, but those are some of the issues I look at that are concerning.
Through the mayor to Councillor Craddock. Yeah, definitely with the, in terms of agricultural lands, we can only look at and you know, obviously regulate our lands that are in the ALR within our own boundary. We do work closely with the SLRD, and they do have an agricultural area plan that the village also respects in terms of trying to preserve and protect farmland. But I hear you, there isn't a lot of ALR land within the village boundaries, but there is some. And I plan on having some, you know, some re-looking at those statements to ensure that we can strengthen that ambition. And in terms of ensuring sufficient land and resources for future settlement, employment, and leisure needs, basically what we're talking about there is having the ability to regulate land use that is, you know, that is vacant and undeveloped, and that we can, you know, have that means to ensure that it is used in the best way possible, in the most efficient way possible.
Thank you.
Any other questions, thoughts? Oh yeah, Councillor Anthony, you're next. Thank you.
Yeah, this looks really comprehensive to me. I think we've got a lot of work to do in our OCP, but as far as the context statement, I think this looks like everything's really well addressed. My only question is whether the mapping for the urban growth boundary has changed.
Through the mayor to Councillor Antonelli, no, it hasn't changed. The urban growth boundary, to my knowledge, has not changed since 2011. Well, hang on. I think when the Sunstone lands were brought into the village of Pemberton, the urban growth boundary was adjusted, but we have not expanded the urban growth boundary since. There hasn't been any OCP amendments or in order to, or that would facilitate that expansion. I'd have to recheck the map in terms of the urban growth boundary and where it sits on top of the bench lands, the Nkukma lands that are under the neighborhood concept plan development right now. But I believe all future growth lands have already been taken into account in 2011. Obviously, it's something I'd look at during my OCP review.
Awesome, thank you. Any more questions or comments?
I just might add that having to go through this exercise at the beginning of an OCP review has been extremely helpful in terms of my, you know, knowing what my marching orders are. So the timing is actually really, really great for the project.
Well, good. Help set the runway for you. Excellent. So the recommendation is that the Village of Pemberton endorse the proposed official community plan regional context statement, table of concordance update for submission to the SLRD board for acceptance. Would somebody like to make that motion? Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Zant. Further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Ms. Pedrini. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yeah, you're welcome. I should have mentioned that if this is accepted by the regional board, then an OCP amendment bylaw would be coming forward to officially take this our regional context statement and incorporate it into our current OCP. So you can watch for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next up, we're on 15C, Pemberton Fire Rescue. We'll wait for Fire Chief Grossman to join us.
The chief mentioned he's experiencing a few internet troubles, so hopefully it's been resolved. I just wanted to flag that before he joined.
Okay. necessary, can you lead the report? Oh, there he is, looking fresh. With us, Chief Grossman, thank you for joining us. Good evening. If you're all good and ready to go, we're ready to talk about the Whistler Blackcomb Foundation grant.
Thank you. Hopefully the internet works, but in case it doesn't, I'll pass it over to Ms. Gilmore. The purpose of this report is to seek council's support in making application for grant funding in the amount of up to $85,000 from the Whistler Blackcomb Foundation. Whistler Blackcomb Foundation in the past has provided funding for upgrading our auto extrication equipment as well as our self-contained breathing apparatus. This application is to seek funding for the purchase of wildland firefighting equipment to protect the village of Pemberton and the service area in the event of a wildfire. So during the 2021 wildfire season, Pemberton Fire Rescue was called upon by the province to assist with the wildfires occurring in the interior. During that, we responded by sending 5 crews over a period of 6 weeks. And each crew member had an opportunity to learn about wildfires, work to save properties, build relationships with other departments, and as a result have brought new skills and knowledge back to Pemberton, which will enable the department to provide better protection to the community. During this wildfire deployment, it became clear that it is important to be prepared, which includes ensuring the department is sufficiently supplied with the right type of equipment to support responses to these types of wildfire events. While equipment was on loan from various departments, it was not uncommon for it to be redeployed back to home communities as it may have been required. In 2013, Logan Lake was designated as a fire smart community, as the first fire smart community in Canada. This accumulated because of years of work putting the resources and the plans in place and to be able to respond to wildfire threats. As a result of this work, when the Tremont Creek fire threatened the community, which included the evacuation of Logan Lake residents, the fire department was well prepared to protect the homes and infrastructure. And I've attached Appendix A, which has more information regarding this. At this time, Pemberton Fire Rescue does not have a full complement of wildfire fighting equipment, and while the department is ready to respond and can do so adequately, it is appropriate that new equipment is purchased to ensure better protection from the community. And the desired list is attached on Appendix B. The impact on the budget and staffing for this is, in order to determine the fire department's priority of use of the wildfire funds, which we accumulated, discussion was had amongst the members and was given the significant wildfires, not only this summer, but over the past several years. We've been doing this since 2017 in British Columbia, as well as the success of Logan Lake had with the Tremont Creek fire during the wildfire preparedness. It was determined that the wildfire equipment was on the top priority of the department instead of such things as a fire hall expansion. The total cost of the equipment was $324,000 plus GST as shown on Appendix B, and the intention is to use these funds, costs recovered by the province through the wildfire deployment, and top up with the grant funding from Whistler Blackcomb, should the village be successful in the grant being approved. And I ask that council approve the purchase of the wildfire equipment as identified, subject to the funding of the Whistler Blackcomb Foundation.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. I appreciate that. Any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Craddock.
Yeah, not a question, but a thank you through the chief and his volunteer fire department to having staffing available to go over and serve your deployment to help other communities. And maybe someday we'll need that back. So a big thank you through to your command, sir. A good job, well done. So I think what you're looking for is something I certainly don't have a problem supporting. So once we get questions through, I'll put the motion on the floor.
Any other questions or any questions? Ms. Gilmore, do we have any other perhaps conflicting or any other applications going to the Worcester Blackcomb Foundation currently?
No, at this time, we don't have any competing applications. We are preparing to submit an application for the April intake for additional amenities for the basketball court.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, if there's no more questions, I think Councillor Caddick put a motion on the floor to support this. Is there a seconder?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Chief Grossman. Have a good night.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. You too.
Thank you. Okay, moving along. We're on 16 bylaws. Ms. Kennedy is going to present. We're on 16A1, which is the Village of Pemberton Tax Exemption Stewardship Pemberton bylaw number 906. Ms. Kennedy.
So thank you once again, Mayor and Council, for taking the time to hear this report. The purpose of the report is to present to Council a tax exemption Stewardship Pemberton Nature Center bylaw number 906, 2021 for first, second, and third readings. On August 10th, Stewardship Pemberton Society executed a new 10-year lease agreement with the village for lands used for the Nature Center. And although it is customary for a leaseholder to make a formal request to Council for tax relief, as this is a renewal and as Council directed staff to prepare the permissive tax exemption bylaw, staff did not ask Stewardship Pemberton to submit a formal request. Estimated foregone taxes are shown in the public notice attached to the report as Appendix B and range from $698.19 in year 1 to $701.69 in year 3. Legislative requirements for public notice were met by publishing the notice of disposition in the Peak News Magazine on July 29th and August 5th, and by publishing the notice of first, second, and third readings of the bylaw in the Peak News Magazine on September 9th and 16th. The recommendation of this report is that tax exemption Stewardship Pemberton Nature Center bylaw number 906, 2021 receive first, second, and third readings. This concludes my report, and I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Ms. Kennedy, any questions? Any comments? So I'd like to make the motion as presented.
I'll make the motion.
Second by Councillor Noble. Further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next up, number 2 is Village of Pemberton Board of Variance bylaw number 893, amendment bylaw number 907, 2021.
Yes, the purpose of this report is to present to Council the Board of Variance bylaw number 893, 2021, amendment fees bylaw number 907, 2021 for first, second, and third readings. The amendment of the bylaw was prompted by a request from Development Services that the Board of Variance application fee structure be changed to allow for cost recovery, as there is currently only a flat fee of $400 for all applications. And due to an oversight, this fee was not included in the fees and charges bylaw number 905, 2021 that was recently adopted. Thus, the amendment is an opportunity to move the fees from the Board of Variance bylaw to the fees and charges bylaw and to make the requested changes. For convenience, the draft fee schedule that will be added to the fees and charges bylaw is included as Appendix C to the report. Wording was added to Section 6 of the bylaw to add provision for cost recovery and to add reference to the fees and charges bylaw. Some minor corrections were made at the same time and are shown in the track changes version of the bylaw attached as Appendix D. The recommendation of the report is that Board of Variance bylaw number 893, 2021, amendment fees bylaw number 907, 2021 receive first, second, and third readings. And this concludes my report. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions? Any comments? Go ahead, Councillor Antonelli.
I'm just wondering how this will work. So previously, people would come to the Board of Variance and they would pay $400, and that would be the cost of, say, getting a variance for the retaining wall. But now, after the fact, they'll get an unknown bill for staff time, or how's it all playing out?
Go ahead, CO Gilmore.
So this is typical of what we have, obviously on a smaller scale, but say somebody was submitting for a development variance permit, the same thing would happen. We have a general application fee, and then we create a tracking system in finance. And we let them know that in advance that if there are additional fees, we try to give them an estimate up front of what we're anticipating those fees to be. They would get a subsequent invoice. And that is our current practice actually for all development applications. It's just Board of Variance is separate and it wasn't included in the larger, it's not included in the development fees bylaw.
Right. So do you have any idea what it could stack up to for just say a minor uncomplicated thing?
So one of the reasons this prompted us is that we have 2 development planners that often assist us on the cost recovery files, and which has no impact on village budget. And so, but their rates are significantly, well, they're higher than what we would charge out at a staff rate. And we're finding that there is a discrepancy. What we're collecting is not actually covering our out-of-pocket fees. So I don't have per se, but it's just the factor of the charge out rate for the independent consultant compared to staff is causing a gap in the cost recovery here. We don't expect to have that all the time, because this will become more of an internal process with staff, but we were without a planner for some time and had to use alternative measures. We just want to make sure in the future that we have the ability to cost recover, but we don't foresee there to be any significant overages or needing actually follow-up invoices in the future.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, would somebody like to move first, second, and reading of Pemberton Board of Variance bylaw number 893 and bylaw and amendment bylaw number 907? Moved by Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Zant. Further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. And then the last one is the Village of Pemberton fees and charges bylaw number 905, amendment bylaw number 908. Ms. Kennedy.
Yes, this is another one, and this one follows from the Board of Variance amendment. And the purpose of this bylaw is to bring the Board of Variance fees into the fees and charges bylaw. So the amendment is very simple. And the amendment bylaw is attached to the report as Appendix B. So it brings the fee schedule in as a Schedule S and corrects the table of contents. And that is the new fees and charges bylaw number 905, 2021, amendment bylaw Board of Variance number 908, 2021 for first, second, and third readings. And this concludes my report.
Councillor Paddock.
Move first and second and third reading.
Seconder. Councillor Noble. Further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Okay, we're getting there, folks. Mayor's report. I do have a number of meetings and conversations I'd like to catch you up on. As a follow-up, I'll start with, I mentioned last time that I had been approached by, and I've now had the meetings with a couple of proponents from our industrial park who manufacture cannabis, just to talk about the pending changes in legislation. So as I mentioned before, there is legislation changes coming to manufacturers of cannabis. There's discussion around direct delivery, which is pretty significant for them as manufacturers, but I don't think really impacts our zoning or us as decision makers. But one of the big things that does impact us, as I mentioned, is storefront sales and tours and that sort of thing. So I did have a couple meetings, one with Coast Mountain Cannabis and the other with Aurora or Whistler Medical Marijuana. There was just general conversation around what things might look like when that legislation's come through. I basically caught them up on or spoke to them about how we got to the point of how we zoned for retail within the village. And what the conversation sounded like to lead to that. I was clear that, if there's changes to the legislation that allow retail and storefront sales at manufacturers, that there would be some zoning changes and discussions to happen at council. There's nothing really to look at just yet. I just sort of identified, I said, it would be interesting to see what the legislation looks like because, we have a number of macro and micro producers in the industrial park. So I felt like the discussion would sound similar to retail in that how many retail outlets do we want in the industrial park? What do we want that to look like? So basically said, waiting for the legislation, keep us up to date, see what that legislation looks like, and we'll be ready to have that conversation. So this is just another update for council and for staff on that. I also did want to extend through those conversations. There was an offer to council if any of you would like to tour some of the facilities. So maybe what I'll do after the meeting is I'll connect all of you via email if there's any desire to set up a council tour of some of the manufacturing facilities in our industrial park. They would love to show us all around, so I'll provide that contact for you. I met with Mr. Jeff Malmgren. He's a contractor for Sea to Sky Community Services, and he reached out to me to talk about food resiliency and food security in the Pemberton Valley, and what that could look like, and some exciting projects. There's some funds available through the United Way of the Lower Mainland to fund Sea to Sky Community Services to support their work towards food security in the corridor. And there's an obvious recognition that, I think obvious, that Pemberton Valley is key to that, in that we are a huge agricultural producer in the corridor, the main agricultural producer in the corridor, and it's a big part of our identity. So this gentleman reached out to me for an early interview discussion, and we talked about food security, about food resiliency, about a food hub, food processing, much along the lines of the discussions we've had at this table at our strategic planning sessions that we've had through our economic development plan, and how we can build off of the food production we have here and provide our locals with access to local food year-round at a better price. Part of this work, this project would look at how it could obviously support Sea to Sky Community Services, the food bank, and that sort of food security. And then maybe an extension of that is how it could provide opportunities for branding, further branding of the Pemberton Valley, processing and storage of local products. So again, locals have more access to local food at a better price, win-win-win. So really interesting conversation. It was a preliminary conversation to gauge the interest. It was, like I say, very much in line with some of our strategic plan conversations and our AcDev conversations. What they would like to do is get together a working group throughout the corridor to see how we can move ahead on this sort of work and this project. So it was very early going, but I thought it was really fascinating and really positive, and in line with many of the objectives we have. So very cool. Where to go next? I met with a group of local, so I've mentioned this before, a group of concerned locals has come together as a working group to see how we can strive towards a safe passage over the Lillooet River by the CN Bridge. They've worked together on a couple options or ideas. We've brought the whole group together in that it was myself, Director Mack, MLA Sturdy, this group of local concerned citizens, and we sort of batted around the issue in the project and how, or not the project, but how we can make it happen. This group has, contacted, I'll look up the name in a second, but a working group through CN to see how we could work together to make this project happen. I gave the history of where I've been at on this over the years and where we've been at over the years. The working group that was established through, in coordination with CN, CN is looking for more detailed information as to how we can make it happen. So basically, after the conversation, we went through options of twinning onto the current CN bridge. What does that look like? What are the liability and the insurance issues? How can that come about? And if that doesn't work, can we create another crossing over the Lillooet separate to the CN Bridge, and can CN support that work, recognizing that the current CN crossing is an issue for all of us. So basically, there was a good roundtable about it. What I recommended was that this group come to council and come to the SLRD board and present their ideas, so that they could look for support from us in principle in terms of moving ahead on this. The group is also looking towards putting together an engineered report as to what a twinning or a cantilevered structure on the CN Bridge would look like. Very high level, just to get some estimates to see how it would work so that they could present it to the working group at CN. They've asked that I connect with some of our contacts at CN, Monsieur Bouchard and others, to see if we can reconnect on this project. But I just wanted to let you know that that conversation is very live. There's a very motivated group in our community to make it happen. They've engaged some of us elected to make it happen, and I've again recommended they come visit council in the near future to tell us about their work and get some further support. What else? We had a Pemberton Valley Emergency Management Committee meeting a couple days ago. Some of the projects Councillor Craddock presented on last meeting. The Arn Canal project is complete. The Birkin and Miller Green River gauges are up and running. There was an update on a few other projects, a couple of interesting things. There was some interest in looking at material coming out of our rivers that we've been trying to look at a marketability approach. So the SLRD is working on that, but in the meantime, the PVDD has also been in conversation with a couple of contractors who may or may not be interested in extracting some of that material. So that could be a good collaboration right there. There was a further conversation on the DMAF funding, the disaster mitigation funding that I've mentioned a couple times, and how we could possibly make it work for the whole valley. And there was further discussion on the river gauge cost discussion that we've had at our table, and that we would be looking at that at budget time. We had a PVIS meeting. I'll let Councillor Zant report on that. And then maybe just finish with UBCM. We had UBCM this week. There was some really interesting resolution conversations. Unfortunately, our resolutions didn't get to the floor because they ran out of time. But they will be circled back to the UBCM executive for a look. There were some really great sessions. I believe, during the keynote speaker, our Councillor Zant had a question, and he asked the question, and just as the answer came about, they ran out of time, so we never got to hear the answer, or maybe that was just me, but yeah, some really interesting sessions. The ministers' meetings throughout, I met and led one meeting on behalf of the regional district with the Minister of Tourism. And this was with regards to a topic very familiar to us, the increase in backcountry tourism, the increase in activity in our area and on our FSRs and on our recreation sites. I made the case for very much that we appreciate and rely on tourism in a big way in our corridor, but that also that there's this been, as we know, a renewed, started before the pandemic, and the pandemic has exacerbated it, but a renewed interest and accessibility to our backcountry, and it is having impacts and potential risks. And so we highlighted those risks, from wildfires to the degradation of our wildlife and ecosystem. And whereas our meeting was with the Minister of Tourism, who doesn't have a lot of say in the budget process, my ask to the minister was, please advocate on our behalf in their cabinet and in any other forum possible to have the boots on the ground that we've been asking for, to have the added resources to support our recreation sites, our parks, our backcountry. The visitation is here. We're grateful for it, but we need to manage it and support it. and we need the Minister of Tourism to advocate on our behalf with that respect. So that was the essence of that meeting. And also had a ministers meeting, a joint ministers meeting with the District of Squamish with the Minister of Childcare, and made the case once again for the fact that we don't fit into the funding criteria of $40,000 per childcare space model that they put forward for funding options. As you know, this is at least the third or fourth time that I've been to her to make this case. That we've applied 2 times and shown that our application is bare bones and that there's no way we can fit under that criteria or that threshold. And, you know, throughout the ministers' meetings this past week or so, I would come away feeling, really, that was a waste of time to, oh, you know what, you keep up at this long enough and you do get some headway and you do get some encouragement. And this was one of the meetings that I came out of encouraged. Our application has been moved to the next round of exploration, recognizing that we don't fit the criteria or the threshold, and that we have exceptional circumstances, or however they call them. So our application is still alive. The minister was very clear to me that she's heard us and that she hasn't forgotten us. And so I walked away from that meeting feeling very encouraged that we still have a chance to maybe qualify for some of those new childcare space funding opportunities. Ms. Gilmore, you were on those calls. Did you want to add anything to that? Go ahead.
I just wanted to share that they did also, the Surrey provincial government has announced another round of funding, but they had actually kept our application in queue and told us that we weren't going to need to submit. We did receive correspondence from them to that effect. So I think, you know, having some follow-up conversations, both at a staff level previous to that minister meeting, and actually, you know, being encouraged that the minister was going to always remember Pemberton and the challenges that we have with childcare, and actually takes that to, you know, further conversations with her counterparts and tries to advocate on her behalf, was definitely very, it was very positive. So I agree. I felt really, there was maybe some momentum somewhere, and was keeping my fingers crossed once we finished that meeting.
Yeah.
We're also going to share some information with the District of Squamish, just on some of the information we gathered during our application. Obviously, our Squamish is in need as well, and so any help we can give them, we're going to pass along some information.
Yeah, we, you know, as you know, we did the meeting jointly because Squamish faces, if not exactly, pretty similar conditions to us in the inability to make that $40,000 threshold. For us, we have flood construction level costs, they have debris flow costs, you know, and just the cost of doing business in the Sea to Sky corridor. But they were encouraged to reapply. And like I say, you know, I went around and around in the meetings this last week going, is that a waste of time? Or to, you know what, you keep pounding on the door and you keep bringing your case forward and you eventually do get attention. So I was very encouraged by this meeting. I think that's all I have. Oh, sorry, no, I have one other thing. Came out of our meeting with VCH, our twice a month meeting, and it came through from the Mayor of Squamish. You know, as you know, our vaccination clinics are shutting down now. There's, you know, less demand, but VCH obviously still wants to provide opportunity for those that aren't vaccinated or need a second vaccination, that ability to do it, to access that vaccination. What was brought forward by the Mayor of Squamish was the fact that with the less opportunities, less clinics being run, she would like to write a letter and was looking for support on this letter to VCH and the provincial government, saying that doctors should be given the ability to administer the vaccine through local clinics, through local doctors' offices. So before I signed on to that, has support. I want to bring it to you guys to make sure that I was not out of line with how council is feeling. Again, the idea is to, in the absence of other clinics, be able to give people the opportunity to get vaccinated by their local doctors. Just to be clear, one of the not criticisms, but downsides to this program is that when you open a vaccine vial, if you don't use it all after a certain amount of time, it's gone, it's garbage. So the concern was, if we have vaccine available in doctors' offices and it's only needed now and then not for a couple days or that sort of thing, are we wasting valuable vaccine? So that is a concern that's been brought forward. The Mayor Squamish is considering penning a letter and was looking for support. So I wanted to bring it to the rest of council for your opinion on this. Any thoughts? Councillor Zanth and Councillor Noble.
Yeah, I would agree with you. That would be definitely a concern of mine. Like you mentioned, as soon as that vial's open, you have to use it up within a certain amount of time. My only suggestion would be is to, if people want to go to the doctor's office and get vaccinated, maybe just have minimum of 6 or however many. I think 6 is the number you can get out of one vial. I can't remember the math, but that would be my only comment to that, is that so you don't waste that vial, you have 6 appointments set up all in one row. But I like I said, the easier it is for people to access to get vaxxed is paramount.
Yeah, I think that's, you hit the nail on the head. That's the tough part, is to be able to make it accessible so that people that haven't gotten vaccinated can get so easily. To do that and ensure that the vial gets used 6 times or whatever that number is sort of a tough situation. Councillor Noble.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it's really even appropriate for us to make this decision without getting feedback from VCH and the doctors.
Well, this was brought to the VCH meeting, and it was, pretty much the discussion centered around what I just said. It was, the group agreed on the call that with the decline of available clinics, we need to make availability of the vaccine as easy as possible. The occasional clinic that serves the whole corridor, for those that are vaccine hesitant, honestly, they're not going to go down to Horseshoe Bay or to Squamish if they're already hesitant, if it's not easily available to them. So if our goal, the conversation with VCH and the other mayors and chairs were, if our goal is to make it easy and accessible to those that might be slightly hesitant to get vaccinated, having it available at your local doctor's office is a way to do that. The concern was that there was waste associated with it. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if the doctors have any thoughts that they could contribute, because they probably have more insight than us as
Well, the doctors
councillors.
those that were involved in the conversation thought it was a good idea. There was no other resolution. There was no other thoughts beyond what I've given you. Yeah, that would be great, because it'll give access to more people.
Mhm.
Easier, especially those that are already hesitant. It might result in some waste. And as we know, as we look at a third booster shot for immunocompromised folks or seniors, and we look at the situation globally and those that have access to vaccine right now, it's a tough conversation. We certainly don't want to be wasting any vaccine at this point. But the other goal is to close the gap on the non-vaccinated. Yeah. So we did get some input. There is no further, I got nothing else to offer you, Councillor Noble, in terms of what they provided.
Well, I certainly support it. If this is what the doctors feel is the best route to go, I'd certainly put the support behind it.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I think I lost order. I think Councillor Antonelli is next.
Yeah, I think on the face of it, it's a good idea, but I also feel hesitant weighing into something that we really don't know anything about. I think it should come from the doctors. So, maybe local doctors have a different perspective. Maybe they don't feel they can have that workload. there's just a lot of questions that I have, and I really don't have any background on it. So for me, I don't think it's something that, you know, we could represent the community on and say we're making an informed decision. But like I said, on the face of it, it seems like a good idea.
Okay, well, if council is comfortable with it, I will continue to have the conversation. I'll pass those messages back on to the Mayor of Squamish, those concerns and those intents, but, and I'll continue to have a conversation based on that. That's good with that. Okay. Council reports. Who's up? Anyone? Councilor Craddock, go ahead.
Thanks very much, Mayor Richmond, and you covered a lot of the items from the Diking District meeting just a week ago. Just two other things to bring up. They received $95,000 from UBCM to do some modeling on the Ryan River, so that was a real positive thing, and they'll get that sorted out fairly quickly. The other thing they're going to be doing is going to the public for a survey regarding long-term planning and future income strategy, because as I mentioned from the last meeting, they're reaching a point where they're thin on resources, and they've got to find a way to kind of top up their bank account if they're going to continue to go forward. So I think that's the two things I'd bring up. I also attended the Rotary Chamber Golf Tournament as a volunteer, and I got to put your hat on, Mayor Richmond, got to cook the sausages. So I felt really good about being a chef for a whole couple of hours. And it was a good turnout. I'm sorry?
Did you wash your hands first?
Twice.
Okay.
And it was completely sold out. It was a great day. And they just got finished when that storm came through and the lightning started to strike. So it turned out to be a wonderful tournament, and hopefully they've raised some pretty good money. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Sir. Anyone else? Councilor Noble, go ahead.
I don't have much, but I did attend the UBCM this week. It was quite the busy week between UBCM, a federal election, and work, but I managed to attend all the resolution sessions. That was my main focus, to show up for those, because I kind of feel, you know, it's one of our duties as councillors to represent on there. And had a lot of positive feedback about the new rainbow crosswalk that's been installed by the community barn. And I've seen that the dog park's been very busy and full of some pretty happy dogs. That's all I really have.
Awesome. Thank you. There were some really interesting resolutions debated.
There were.
Despite the Zoom or the, you know, the virtual approach to it, and it definitely slowed us down a little bit, but there was some good conversation in the last second.
The technology is quite amazing, though. I was typing into the help desk to find a link that I needed, and they put it up before I hit send. Apparently, they can see you type. I may have stuck a Post-it over my camera after that, but it's amazing. They are on it.
If I heard one more time, hit continue and then confirm, I swear I heard that in my sleep. Hit continue and hit confirm, otherwise your vote doesn't count. That one, yeah.
They were trying to fill awkward space.
It's good though. Councillor Zant, I think you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Richmond. Yeah, I attended UBCM as well. My question did get asked, by the way, or answered in the keynote. It was, you know, Rick Mercer was Rick Mercer. He's hilarious. His response was basically they should be having classroom elections. If you're trying to get youth involved with politics, start them when they're young. And the story he told in front of that was quite funny too. And I would, the whole interview was quite funny and typical Rick Mercer. I would encourage anybody to go back online to the UBCM website and definitely listen in. It was quite good. I was also impressed that the Premier was taking questions as well. I didn't get mine in there. It wasn't quick enough, but I was quite impressed. He was taking questions off the cuff like that. So big thank you to yourself for supporting and representing the village the way you did. That's fantastic. So thanks for pounding on those doors. As far as PVIS is concerned, there was the conversation we brought from council about the, about having the, I'm having that. Keeping the programs available open for permanent residents first and foremost. And the conversation kind of came down to, at this point, the village is going to keep an eye on whether or not that becomes an issue, whether the village of permanent residents are having a hard time getting their kids into those programs. One of the conversation topics was that there are a few people who work for the village of Pemberton, and they actually put their kids in those programs as well. So the comment that came out is we want to shoot ourselves in the foot, essentially, from not allowing those people to apply their kids for the programs in Pemberton when they're working for the village. At this point, the administration had mentioned that we're not really in an area right now where that's concerned, but it is going to be monitored, was what came out of it. So if it does become an issue, then we can bring it back to PVIS and rediscuss it. And then the thought was also brought up that some of these programs aren't being filled completely. And instead of turning people away, we might look at actually increasing the amount of people or amount of kids that can be in those programs. The CEO's verbal report was second soccer field's almost complete. And they're working with the Hydro, BC Hydro, Connect Lights. And the RFP's gone out for the amenity building.
Sorry, if I make a correction, I haven't, the RFP for the amenity building has not gone out yet.
No, sorry, that was my bad. It's in the queue is what I've got written here. So it's being written, if I remember correctly. The contract got signed for the Bike Skills Park. And we got a second quarter update from Ms. Burns. In the second quarter, indoor fitness classes were closed because of the PHO orders, but they moved outside, and the people that did attend the outside fitness classes were quite ecstatic to be outside doing something and just in generally exercising. She spoke about the water restrictions and how water park water was cut down by 30% and the irrigation was cut down by 50% and then was increased after the heat dome was gone because everything was starting to die. So they increased it a little bit just to kind of bring things back to life. And I think that pretty much the job of town looked pretty good this summer. So one of the other reports was, which I was really encouraged to hear, is that the community center held 13 vaccination clinics where they managed to get 4,300 people vaccinated, which is fantastic. I saw there was another clinic yesterday, so looking forward to seeing those numbers go up. The basketball court hit a bit of a stall due to staffing shortages. So hopefully with the new maintenance gentleman that has started, we might start to see construction on that starting in spring 2022. We got a letter from the Winterfest committee. Unfortunately, Winterfest is being canceled and they're going to return the funds back to the village, the PDIF fund. I think that's my report. Thank you very much.
Councillor Zant, we seem to have lost our chair. Councillor Noble, you are acting in, oh, he's back.
Just in the nick of time.
Yeah.
Sorry, I lost battery. I didn't think we'd be going this late.
So do you want me to give my report again then?
Yeah, do it all over again. No, I'm pretty sure I caught all of it there. Thanks, Ryan. Councillor Antonelli, did you do that already and I missed it?
No, I'll be quick. I attended UBCM too. I thought it was very interesting. I think my favorite part was the Bhangra dance break. On Ted's behalf, I attended the Municipal Insurance Association and I was able to vote. It was mostly just housekeeping changes to policy. The one that stands out that was quite interesting was that municipalities cannot be held responsible for transmission of COVID or other diseases. So they've sort of updated their wording and their policies around that. And that's about it. The rest was really just housekeeping, and yeah, leave it at that.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, I thought they did a good job. Again, it's UBCM is so much about the exchange of ideas and being able to be next to each other and hear and listen and engage. So doing it virtually has definitely been a challenge, and I think they did a great job. So I appreciate it. Correspondence for action. We have two, one from Yves Gallant and one from MJ Mullen regarding the live share development and parking issues. Staff, or would council like to make a recommendation on that? To refer to staff as part of the discussions on this development. Councilor Craddock, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate that we see the letters and refer them to staff so that they can use them in the planning department and future applications. Thank you.
So a motion to refer to the planning, to staff for planning and discussion purposes.
Correct.
Seconded by Councilor Zant. Further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. For action, we also have from Andrew Horia, Chair and Area B Director, a recommendation that a donation in the amount of $1,000 be provided to the village of Lytton to assist with the recovery and rebuilding following the devastating wildfires, and that the funds be allocated from the Community Enhancement Fund. Thoughts? Councillor Noble, go ahead.
I think it's a good idea. We've had a few things returned, bowls and barrels, Winterfest. Let's help Lytton out.
Okay, so you'd like to make that motion?
Yes.
Seconder on that motion, Councillor Zant. Further discussion? Councillor Craddock, go ahead.
Yeah, what's the amount of the motion?
The recommendation is $1,000 through the Community Enhancement Fund. Ms. Gilmore, what do we have in CEF?
I'll let Ms. Fraser answer that, but we did just put $750 back in from the, is that correct? Or did we do
That's
500? Okay, 500.
So we have $2,000 left in the Community Enhancement Fund. Based on the villages, or based on BC stats, the village's population as of 2020 was 3,103. So if we were to match the contribution, we would deplete our Community Enhancement Fund, and we would have to find funds from another area to match. So staff put forward a suggestion of $1,000, which leaves $1,000 in community enhancement. We do know that each year we contribute to either to both the Lilwat Christmas Bureau as well as the Pemberton Food Bank around Christmas time. And sometimes there's some other smaller fundraising organizations, activities that council has traditionally liked to contribute to. If they were happening this year, then we would put those forward. Last year, we didn't see a lot of uptake, so we contributed $250 each to the Lilwat Christmas Bureau and the Pemberton Food Bank, because that's what we had left in our Community Enhancement Fund. So this year we have $2,000 left at this point.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Motion is for $1,000 from the CEF to go towards the Lytton rebuilding. Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up, we have a letter from Jody Tracy regarding concerns around the speeding on Pemberton Farm Road East. Any thoughts or actions on this? Councillor Craddock, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And I did forward some emails to the administrator regarding some other letters that we received. It's still a concern out on that area. I'm not sure why it was called a Forest Service road. I don't think it is going up to that section, but I'm not sure how we can fix the problem. It's obviously the speed reader needs to be removed because nobody's paying attention to it. And maybe we could put on the Pemberton Farm Road and see if we can slow people down in that area. But short of putting some speed bumps in, I'm not sure what we can do. And I guess through the administrator, is there any reason we can't put some speed bumps out there?
So it's actually had multi-layers of jurisdiction over that road. The municipality is in charge of maintaining it, but there's overlap between Ministry of Transportation, Flynn Road is a FSR road and a municipal road. So it is an active hauling road. And so therefore we're not able to put speed bumps along that road. So we've looked at when we go to do improvements on this section, could we do rumble strips? However, if we are to improve this road, it will only make it faster because it will remove the potholes and some of the other, I guess, not as good portions of the road, which will only encourage people to go faster. We have sent correspondence out to the contractors out there, to the developers out there. I don't know how we reach all the people who are going up there biking, because there are quite a few. We've actually added more signage. We got the ICBC grant to put the reader sign. I don't know if you see it, but there is a significant amount of signage along that road. At this point, I'm not sure. Once we get the Friendship Trail grant, which we've applied for 2 of them, so I'm thinking we'll get one, that will alleviate that concern a little bit. We have looked at a bunch of different solutions and we don't really have anything that would sort of help protect the people walking along there at this time.
Go ahead, Councilor Scott.
Yeah, just through the administrator, I've only been in town 16 years, but I have yet to see a logging truck on that road. So to call it an active logging road seems to be a bit of a far stretch, but I guess we can't do much about that.
I'm sorry, when I mean active, it's just at any moment we could get in whoever logging company, whoever has the woodlots up there would be able to get a permit and start actively hauling on that road. It just doesn't have the cross ditches and other things that prevent people from going all the way up. So therefore it's still active.
You think there's,
go ahead.
Yeah, you think there's got to be some solution to slow people down. I'm not too sure what it is. I was in one community just recently that they took a huge rope and tied it together and put that across the road, and that slowed people down, which would be easier to pull off the road if the forestry ever starts again. But it'd be nice to come up with some solution.
Councillor Antonelli.
Narrowing the road can help slow people down. So not, the whole width of it, but just have, say, some planters or something that creates one narrow area. So I'm sure you know all about that, but that's one idea for the future. In the meantime, can we send this to the RCMP and see if there can't be some enforcement or?
We have done that.
Like that?
Yeah, we've actually contacted them, but I need to set up, we have a new, obviously Corporal Hamilton is gone. And so I need to set up we're just doing that now, recurring meetings, which I will make this as a standing line item to have conversation with our CMP. They did say one of the problems is that it tends to be different times of day when they go out there and sit, and then there's no one driving and going by. And but we do that with bylaw. We take a little trip around and we look at different places at different times of day on our patrol. So if they could just sort of incorporate that, I don't think that'd be too much extra work. So I'm happy to still keep advocating on that end with our CMP.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think I don't know what else we can do. It's well signed. We got the speed reader. And as the CAO says, when we get the grant funds to do the trail extension along there, hopefully that will narrow the road, as Councillor Antonelli says, and provide safe passage along the side. I hear the concerns. I know they're real. I've seen people speed along there, so I get it. At this point, do we want a motion to have staff respond with what has been done and what we are looking at this point, or how do we want to respond to the correspondence?
I think we should do that.
Councillor Craddock, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And one of the letters I forwarded to the CEO was from the president of the Strata. So if we're going to send the letter out, I'd like to have it CC'd to him also. Thanks.
So a motion to reply to this letter and CC the Strata president, explaining what steps have been taken up to date and that we will continue to work and find ways to try to control the speed along there. Anything to add to that? Is that good? Moved by Councillor Craddock, seconded by Councillor Noble. For the discussion. Any opposed? Motion carries. Correspondence for information. We have 4. Would anybody like to point anything out? Seeing none, can I get a motion to receive all 4? Councillor Zant, seconded by Councillor Noble. Discussion. Any opposed? Motion carries. Decision on late business. Late business. We have none. Notice of motion. Question period. So for those in attendance who wish to ask questions, please click on the raise hand feature in the webinar controls. This will notify our staff that you would like to ask a question, and staff will unmute your microphone when it's your turn to speak. Please be reminded that only questions directly related to items discussed during this meeting are permitted. Kennedy, are there any interested parties?
We have no questions this evening.
Now we went long enough that we lost them all. Okay, seeing no question periods, questions. I'll look for a motion to go back in camera, please. Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Zant. Any opposed? We'll go back in camera. Does anybody need a 2-minute break? Are we all good? All good?